I hope everyone has gotten their celebrating out of the way because it's time to get to work. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we dive into what happened in the season series and what we're beginning to watch as we analyze the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's time for Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is April 15th. It will be April 16th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to go back and take a look at the Magic's 4 games against Cleveland Cavaliers, what we can learn from those games that will help the Magic win the series, what they need to watch out for from those games that could help them, that will help them in this series. And we'll begin breaking down some of the key and early matchups to know as we begin to break down this series. We got a lot more coming on the playoffs this week. We will, of course, talk with our friends at Locked On Cavs later on this week. We'll talk a little bit more about the Magic individually, what we're watching for and who needs to step up there. We're just going to dive right into this series throughout the course of the week because we get to relax a little bit this week. Magic had today, and they'll actually have tomorrow off. Hopefully, guys, getting rested, getting ready, and then we'll see what they do when they get up to Cleveland here very, very shortly. But before we do any of that, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side. When I play to win. And it is, and I am a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. We are counting down to Game 1 on Saturday as the Orlando Magic will take on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Time still TBD. It appears they're going to wait and see what happens in the Warriors-Kings game Tuesday night. So maybe when we record tomorrow, we will have official time for Game 1 on Saturday, as well as Game 2 at either Monday or Tuesday, it looks like. I booked my flight. I'm all ready to go up to Cleveland. I just don't know how long I'm staying. But that's how it goes in the playoffs. So we're still waiting for the full schedule to come out. But we are at a point where we can begin breaking down this matchup. And obviously, the first place you go for whatever it's worth as you go back and look at the regular season games. And obviously, and again, and then obviously on top of that, the regular season games between the Magic and the Cavs have a lot of asterisks to them. Magic and Cavs split the season series 2-2. Obviously, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland missed a lot of time, especially early in the season. The Magic finished the season series, the first game after the All-Star break. That game's always weird. That was a game the Magic won. Good win, not taking anything away from the Magic for winning that, but I don't put a lot of credence in that first game after the All-Star break. It's weird. Donovan Mitchell's been up and down. He had a knee injury. I think he played in all 4 games. So there are the regular season matchups help us a little bit, and I'll break down some more. I'm actually going to break down some video from that series and a key matchup from that series on my Patreon page on Tuesday. There's only so much we can learn, but there are a few trends that I think are really, really important, and trends that I do think are going to carry over into this series. The big one for me, both losses to the Cavs had the same pattern to them. Now, and I'm pretty sure we noted them at the time, but they both had the same pattern. First, in the win over the Magic in December, the Cavs outscored the Magic 37-20 in what turned into a 121-111 victory. In the win over the Magic in January at the Kia Center, Cavaliers outscored the Magic 38-19 in a 126-99 victory. You could see the high score from the Cavs. Magic offense, obviously inconsistent there. We have talked about this a lot. If you're a Magic fan, you know this. The Magic are really bad in first quarters. In fact, they lost I think it was they lost 11 of their last 13 first quarters. 11 of 13. The two they won were was the win over the Bulls, the win over the Grizzlies. And those were blowouts. Those are like 17-20 point wins in the first quarter. You don't have to win the first quarter. Obviously, you just have to be competitive. It's the old golf saying. You can't win a game. You can't win a tournament in the first round, but you can definitely lose it. And in the two games against the Cavs that the Magic lost this year, they lost them in the first quarter. Just trying to play that much uphill is so difficult. And especially in the playoffs, it's going to be even harder. It is probably too simple to say the Magic cannot fall behind. But the Magic cannot fall behind. If they're down 15 points in the first quarter, the game is virtually over. And especially with the way the Cavs play when they got those leads. In the two games that the Cavs beat the Magic, they shot 14 for 34 from 3 and 20 for 38 from 3. Especially that second game in January. Sam Merrill had, I think, 8 threes in the game. I think he had 5 in the first half. They just popped threes like they were candy. And regardless of who the team is, that's not just a Cleveland thing. If the Magic give up a lot of threes, they're not winning the game. They just, whatever they can make up in the paint, whatever they can make up at the free throw line, they're not going to be able to make up giving up 16, 17, 18 threes. They're not going to make up giving up a high percentage of threes. And the two losses to the Magic, Cleveland shot 9 for 40 in the first game and 10 for 22 in the second game. 10 for 22 is not a bad percentage, but a very, very low volume. So chasing them off the three-point line is going to be really important. And, to me, that's what I remember most from the games against the Cavs this year. Honestly, like when I began thinking about and figuring out how to break down this series, that's what I thought about most, is remembering that these games largely came down to three-point shooting. Now, Cleveland is middle of the league in three-point field goal percentage, 36.7%, 13.5 threes per game. If the Magic can keep them at that average, they will have a chance in these games. But if they're shooting 40+% from three, if they're making 16, 17 threes, the Magic don't have the ability to keep up. Just plain and simple. This is a series between two of the best defensive teams in the league. These are two top 10 defenses. However, while Cleveland's offense isn't great by any stretch of the imagination, the team that can get this into the 1-teens or 120s is the team that's going to win. Both teams want to keep the scores low. And we're going to see some rock fights. I will go on record and predict we will see a game where the two teams struggle to clear 100. We will see a game where one team scores 120. It's probably going to be Cleveland. That's a game they're going to win. But this series is going to be a rock fight. It is. There's a reason that we're all expecting this series to be on NBA TV, and it's not simply because these are two smaller markets without kind of upper echelon stars. This series, for all those people that say they love 90s basketball and they love that physical style of game, put your money where your mouth is and watch Magic Cavs. Like, seriously. Having said that, like I said on yesterday's show, as you begin to conceptualize this series, you trust Cleveland to find shooting. And that was one of the things Cleveland really focused on this offseason because it was something they struggled with in the playoffs last year. They struggled last year, making shots, giving Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland kind of the break that they needed and support that they needed with shooting. They got a great defender in Isaac Okoro. He's going to play a little bit probably. But they got Karis LeVert. They've got Max Strus. They've got George Niang. They got Sam Merrill. Not all these guys are going to play, but when they do play, they're dangerous. They can spread the floor out a little bit. Or they can spread the floor out a lot, as they did against the Magic in the 2 wins. Three-point shooting to me is the biggest factor in this series. If the Magic could force Cleveland into misses and make a few of their own, because remember, the Magic shot 2 for 23 in that December loss at Cleveland. by far the worst three-point shooting game of the season. We went back and looked at it. It was like 19 of the 23. The closest defender was 4 more feet away. Magic kept telling us after that game, we got open shots. We just missed them, whatever. That's what we're dealing with here. Orlando, can shoot poorly and still win, but they can't shoot poorly and win if the other team shoots well. And so to me, again, what we can learn from the Magic's 2 games against the Cavs is you got to get off to a better start. You cannot put yourself in a deep deficit again, especially against this Cavs team that defends so well. They've got some offensive weapons. They will put pressure on the Magic's defense in a way that maybe the Magic can't necessarily put on Cleveland's defense consistently. The Magic cannot get into a shooting contest. Cleveland will win a shooting contest. They're not the greatest shooting team in the world, obviously, but they got more shooters than Orlando does. And so Orlando can't get into a shooting contest with the Cavs. To me, everyone says it's a make or miss league. This is the game. Like the whole game of this series is beyond the 3-point line and which team shows up on a night-to-night basis. I hate to, there's obviously going to be other things. We'll get to a few other things here, but I like the experience from this season for whatever it's worth, whatever the regular season games are worth. The experience of the season tells me 3-point shooting is going to determine who wins and who loses this series and each game. We'll talk about a few more keys and other matchups that we're watching as we get ready for the playoffs. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And, I'm personally, like, I like to have things ordered. I like to know when things are going to be. I like having my schedule set. Planning for the next week is really difficult when the NBA is not giving us a schedule. I booked my travel. I got all that done, and I'm not a very experienced traveler. So, that's all, I've gotten better at it because I've done a few trips now. But it's stressful. And I'm sure everyone can relate. Every Magic fan thinking of traveling to Cleveland. I'm trying to coordinate, give information to my family because they want to go to the games next weekend, games 3 and 4. I'm sure there's a lot of Magic fans stressing out about when game 3 and 4 are going to be. It's all out of our control. Hopefully we'll have a schedule after tomorrow, after Tuesday night, but it's stressful not to have to plan around things and have all these contingencies and have so many things up in the air. It bothers me a lot. I like things set in stone. But one thing therapy has really helped me is to manage these emotions and manage the frustration of not knowing, of realizing I can only control what I can control, and I can only be prepared for all the uncertainty out there in the world. That's heavy, isn't it? Therapy, though, can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems in our favorite sports teams, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. This week is a big one. It's time for the Locked On NFL Mock Draft live on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern Time, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. I think as we begin to think about this Cavs series, so, kind of big picture for me is the shooting. Like, we know shooting's the problem for the Magic. Everyone's expecting Orlando to chase after Klay Thompson or Malik Monk this summer. We'll see what the Magic ultimately do, but we're all pretty sure that if this regular season didn't do it, the playoffs are going to tell Jeff Weltman and the Magic front office, like, hey guys, get guys who can shoot the ball. Make sure you have 2-3 shooters on the floor. Make Paolo, Banchero, and Franz Wagner's life so much easier with a little bit more consistent shooting on the floor and shooting that defenses can respect. That is going to be the challenge of this series. And again, I think that's going to, there's a lot of different things that'll happen and obviously ways to get those shots. But to me, that's like the X factor. Is Cleveland making shots? Is Orlando making shots? These teams are pretty evenly matched, and we'll get to some more interesting matchups here in a moment. But obviously, I think one of the bigger storylines for the Orlando Magic in this series is that this is Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner's first time in the playoffs. This is their first time in the postseason. And with very few exceptions, it's not that they're going to play poorly. It's not that they're not going to put up some interesting numbers and put up some big numbers. Most of the time, your first time in the playoffs, you suck. I don't mean to be blunt. You're not good. You struggle, especially your first time kind of as a star. And, you have to kind of learn how to deal with the pressure and intensity of these games. I am very convinced that we will see a Paolo Banchero 30-point game. Like we saw Sunday, we even saw a little bit Friday, honestly, how he can elevate his game. It would not surprise me if we get a triple-double from Paolo. I believe that he is a player who is built for these kind of games and built to elevate his game in these moments. He showed that to us at Duke. That was one of the reasons why I was very convinced he was the pick. Because I saw in the NCAA tournament at Duke in pressure games, that dude did not blink and provided some really big minutes for his team to make sure that they made it to the Final Four. I am certain that he's built for this. We all joke about Franz being fourth quarter Franz. I think Franz Wagner will have some very big games too. The difference will be, I think we'll also see them have one really bad game. And again, I don't want people to freak out about that when it happens. I don't want people to freak out if they struggle. Remember, Nikola Vucevic really struggled in that series against the Raptors, came back against the Bucks the next year and was awesome. Dwight was not good in his first playoff series against the Pistons. I know that was against the Pistons back in 2007. Came back in 2008, was nearly averaging a 20-20. It was 20 and 15 against the Raptors. Struggled again against the Pistons because Pistons were really good. And had a lot of physical bodies to throw at him, but he played a lot better. So you learn. And again, this is part of the learning process for him. I think the expectation is that both Paolo and Franz are going to go through these ups and downs. When it comes to them, though, who succeeds and who struggles might come down to who Evan Mobley's guarding. And to me, if series are about matchups and series are about these kind of decisions, how the Magic attack Evan Mobley or how the Magic avoid Evan Mobley, because Evan Mobley is a very good defender, that's going to be a huge part of this series. Now, obviously, you have Jared Allen kind of backing him up in the paint as a rim protector. Whether I think the Magic will go to a lot of 5-out sets. They'll have Wendell Carter out on the perimeter. They'll have Jonathan Isaac playing some center. Mo Wagner works around the basket, but they're going to try and draw Jared Allen out of the paint to create some space. And again, we'll see, a lot of this series will, again, come down to 3-point shooting. If Wendell Carter makes an early three, makes 2 early threes, especially, suddenly Jared Allen can't camp in the paint. If Jonathan Isaac makes his threes, which until Sunday, he was really hitting his outside shot, then that center can't camp out in the paint. And suddenly you have that driving lane to get to the basket. You can run some empty corner plays to kind of create more space and more driving lanes. This is what the Magic are really working toward, is figuring out, okay, how do we create ways to put pressure on the rim? The one thing they're not going to be able to do is attack Evan Mobley. Paolo Banchero had a really good run against the Cavs this season. 23 points per game, 46.1% shooting. That included a 42-point effort in that first game in December up in Cleveland. However, Granted, he was sick in this game. Paolo scored only 12 points in that post-All-Star break game. According to data from NBA.com, Paolo Banchero shot only 3 for 13 against Evan Mobley. Franz Wagner shot only 4 for 11. And I think Evan Mobley, I think the Cavs, if I remember correctly, put Mobley on Wagner. And so Franz averaged 16 points per game, 5.3 rebounds per game, and 4.8 assists per game on 39.3% shooting. That to me, again, those numbers suggest to me that Evan Mobley guarded Franz Wagner a lot in the games that the Magic matched up with the Cavs. It's not that the Magic should avoid Evan Mobley. You can't be afraid of anybody. Your best players have to be able to score against the best defenders. But to me, this is if we're talking about individual matchups, like look, Jalen Suggs on Donovan Mitchell, absolutely critical matchup. But to me, I think matchup-wise, if skill-wise or X-factor-wise or stat-wise, three-point shooting is the stat that I'm looking at. And it's like, okay, the Magic won this game. They made 38% of their threes and held Cleveland to 11 threes total in the game. Magic won that game. Or the Cavs won this game. Well, the Cavs hit 17 threes. The Magic hit 8. Cavs won. That makes sense. Matchup-wise, individual player-wise, I'm watching where the Cavs put Evan Mobley, because if you look at Cleveland's ideal lineup, are they going to start Max Strus or are they going to start Isaac Okoro? Either way, those two guys can't guard Paolo or Franz. Paolo and Franz need to attack. Isaac Okoro can, but Okoro is too small to guard Paolo and probably too small to guard Franz at the end of the day. The Magic are going to attack those guys endlessly. They're going to force rotations, and then they're going to kick out and see what happens. They're not going to attack Evan Mobley. And so where the Cavs position Mobley, that's going to determine a lot of the Magic's attack and where the Magic go and who the Magic get after. A lot of people are saying, okay, with Jalen Suggs, Donovan Mitchell's not, Donovan Mitchell's still going to attack Jalen Suggs. Donovan Mitchell's an all-star player. But if Jalen Suggs locks out Donovan Mitchell, then Darius Garland attacking Gary Harris, Magic, I would say the Magic match up perfectly with those two guys because they both still scored a ton of points against the Magic this year. But the Magic at least positionally have a matchup there to play with. What the Cavs don't have is the Cavs don't have the personnel to guard both Paolo and Franz without help, without bringing Jared Allen over, without trapping the box or whatever it is. Whoever Mobley's not guarding is the one that's going to have the ball making decisions. And Cleveland's going to have to decide, how do we handle this? Again, we're looking for ways, for areas that the Magic have an advantage. And I'll get to one more here in a minute. The Magic have an advantage at forward. They have a matchup. They have a positional advantage there. And so it's going to be about, okay, how do we press this advantage? How do we force Cleveland into difficult decisions? That's what the playoffs are about, is, pushing a team to make difficult decisions and then punishing them for the decision that they make, taking what the defense gives you there. To me, if the Magic are going to win this series, they're going to have to find a way to attack Mobley eventually. But if they're going to win this series, it's going to be right there. That is the weak spot in Cleveland's lineup for Orlando. Is whichever one of Paolo or Franz Mobley is not guarding, that's the guy you're running your offense through. And so Cleveland will probably, Cleveland throughout the regular season said, we want him on Franz. They might decide we want Mobley on Paolo, or they might, they're going to switch him around a lot. And Orlando's going to have to recognize where he's at and pull him away from the basket a little bit. To me, that's a huge matchup in this series. I know everyone wants to talk about Suggs versus Mitchell, but to me, it's Mobley versus Paolo and Franz, because Mobley can't guard both of them. And I think that's going to be a huge turning point in this game, in this series. We'll talk about some areas where you think Cleveland has an advantage, but maybe they don't. Some toss-up ideas coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at Monopoly Go. I can be a little competitive, I definitely can be very competitive. Not gonna lie about it. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime. The scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low. Not sure how you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists to take as much of my friend's money as possible. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. Scratch that competitive edge anywhere with Monopoly Go. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now on the App Store for free or Google Play. Also for free. I read that word. Okay, couple more points I want to make as we begin to look at this series. I do think the Magic and Cavs, I think this is going to be a really competitive series. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think Orlando has a lot more questions about them than I think Cleveland does. But Cleveland has plenty of questions too. They really struggled toward the end of the season. Donovan Mitchell's health is definitely a real issue. And while Orlando has some very apparent flaws, Cleveland does feel beatable. I think Magic fans were right to say Cleveland is at least a more favorable matchup than some of the matchups we were looking at. Certainly more favorable than having to go down to Miami on Tuesday. Certainly more favorable than dealing with the Sixers. This is for the best for everybody. And the Magic, I think, are very capable of winning the series. They are heavy underdogs to win the series. Not a lot of people giving them a chance. I think I saw that there was implied odds of like 35% to win the series. So we are saying there's a chance, but definitely a lot. The Magic are going to have their work cut out for them. This is a flawed team. We know that. Very unproven. We're going to learn a lot about this team here in the next 2 weeks. And, whatever happens in the series, it's going to help this Magic team as we begin to think about the offseason, how to get better, how to get deeper into the playoffs moving forward. Again, I will repeat this. This season is the first year. It is the first step in a long journey. The Dwight Howard Magic lost in the first round in 2007, lost in the second round in 2008. They were in the finals in 2009. You have to fail a little bit to be successful in this league. And so you very rarely does a team just sprout up and win a championship. It takes years of learning, growing together. Takes a couple failures to really begin to understand, okay, this is what we have to do to win. And so that's going to be one of the storylines in this playoff series. And we want to win this series. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to now analyze this series as if the Magic should win it. Because they're very capable of winning this series. And so one of the questions I think we all have is, okay, so what could turn this series? What are, I talked about one thing the Magic have to do with the 3-point shooting. I think that's the big X factor, fast starts, huge X factor. Those are things that the Magic have to do. We talked about the key matchup, Paolo and Franz versus Evan Mobley. Here are the things that I think are the toss-ups, the things that I don't know which team is going to show up for. By the numbers, the Magic should be a great rebound, should win the rebounding battle. The Cavs finished 14th in defensive rebound rate. The Magic were second in the league in defensive rebound rate. They were one of the top offensive rebounding teams in the league. So despite having Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, two very tall players who should control the paint, they give up a lot of rebounds. Now, they prevent a lot of second chance points. They defend really well, but they give up a lot of rebounds. The Magic have kind of the opposite problem where they're not perceived as a very good rebounding team, but they do rebound the ball really well. And so something doesn't match up with the eye test, I think, for a lot of people. So perception and numbers are kind of at odds here with both teams. The Cavs, as much as they want to talk about their 3-point shooting in last year's playoffs, and we'll talk to Locked On Cavs here. Cleveland's story entering this playoffs is redemption for losing to the Knicks last year. They had home court advantage, and the Knicks worked them. The Knicks smoked them last year in the playoffs. And this whole season for Cleveland has been building up to this measure of redemption of we got out-muscled. The lights were too bright for us. We got to, they've been waiting for these playoffs. They know how to get there. They kind of pace themselves through the season. They know how to get here. They know what this time of year is about. And so it's, they've got, there's a lot on the line here. They know what they're up to. So this is the rub then for the Magic. Rebounding is going to be key. You got to, both teams are going to be trying to limit possessions. Both teams, I think, are going to try and slow these games down. Every possession is going to matter, and every second chance point you get is going to feel like double because that's a stop you should have had that you didn't get. That's going to be a huge factor in the series. And I'm not sure which team wins that, to be perfectly honest. The numbers tell me Orlando should do a good job on the glass. My eyes tell me that they won't because it just feels like this is a skill Cleveland can, if they need to focus on it, can turn on and be fine. And again, a lot of this stuff feels like very basic and simple. Of course, like make more threes, you're going to win the game. But like these are the battles that are going to matter in this series. The other thing that I'm looking at, the other thing that I'm thinking about as well is clutch play. If you've heard me talk about clutch play on this podcast before, you know that I don't like clutch stats. I don't like putting too much focus on what happens at the end of games because games are won and lost throughout the course of a game. Clutch games, close games are essentially to me are just crapshoots. You're just kind of rolling the dice and seeing where the dice land. There are some trends that maybe you can look at, but your record is often not reflective of how you're actually playing. It's just kind of random sometimes. And as I always say, good teams don't win close games. They avoid them. But in the playoffs, you got to win close games because in the playoffs, at this point, all that matters is winning. Again, it's just like I said all last week. I don't care if the Magic give up 120 points as long as they score 121. As long as they score one more point than their opponent, their defense did a good job. That's what we're talking about right now, is you got to be able to scratch out wins. And so when you look at clutch play, a clutch win is the difference between a 2-2 series and a 3-1 series. And that difference is huge. And this is an area where the records are deceiving. Orlando is 21-14 in clutch situations. That's when the game is within 5 points in the final 5 minutes. The Cavs were just 20-22. Now, Orlando has a plus 2.2 net rating in clutch situations, but that's anchored by their defense, which stiffens up at 100.8 points per one possession. You usually see offenses go into a little bit of a shell late in games. So offenses do come down in close situations, but the Magic's defense gets really good. And that checks out. I cannot think of a time, maybe the Nuggets game in Denver, where the Magic erased a 5-point deficit with 5 minutes to go. A lot of their clutch situations, honestly, are teams kind of sneaking into that territory late in the games because their offense goes into such a shell. But a lot of their wins are, we have the lead, we can maintain the lead because our defense is awesome. That's kind of the Magic way. The Cavs are 20-22. But the Cavs have a minus 5.3 net rating with a solid, but not spectacular, 111.5 defensive rating. That's, top 10 defense in the league. That's top defense in the league overall. But in clutch time, that's about middle of the league, actually. Their defense doesn't elevate in those moments or in those clutch situations. However, yes, Paolo's hit some big shots. They got Donovan Mitchell. They got Darius Garland. They got guys who can make big shots. And so, if we're talking coin flips, if you think this is a 7-game series, if you think this is a 6-game series, whatever the case may be, there's going to be a game that turns things. It could be game 1, could be close. It could be game 2 that's close. It could be game 3, could be game 4. There's going to be a game that is very close and turns the series. And That's how these series go. You got to find a way to win those close games. And that's an area where this Magic team is very unproven. I know, Paolo's gotten some big shots. Franz has hit some big shots. Jalen Suggs has hit some big shots. But they're unproven at this level making these plays. And that's where I think we'll see the inexperience really play in. Like, I am worried about this team in a close game. Because I think that's where the inexperience is going to really show itself. Because, especially if they're on the road and they have to hold on to a lead, it's going to get loud. Weird things happen in the playoffs. And so we'll see how the Magic handle all this. Like, you could already tell, like, where we're beginning to kind of break down what's going to matter in this series. It's going to be a fascinating and fun series. It's going to be defensive-minded series. It's going to be low scores. But this is going to be a fascinating and fun series. We're going to continue to dive into it throughout the course of the week, really talk about what the Magic need to see and who the Magic are going to be here in the postseason. But I want to thank you again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, and all Family Stone podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. You can find us as well on YouTube. Just search for Locked On Magic. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. Coming up on Orlando Magic Daily, we will have a retrospective, a look back at the 2009 Eastern Conference Finals series. The last time the Magic and Cavs faced off in the playoffs. We'll look back at that series on Orlando Magic Daily. Definitely check that out. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub. You can find that at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub for even more Magic content. I'll be breaking down more specifically how the Magic have attacked and should attack Evan Mobley on Tuesday. So definitely sign up for that, because that will be behind the paywall. Thank you again, as always, for your support. Now that you're done listening to me, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now available on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts like me of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Day now available on the free Fire TV channels app. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.